Champions League, the UEFA Champions League. So let's just be quick and precise on this one, okay? Real Sociedad 1, Paris Saint-Germain 2, right? Give credit, all the credit must just go to Kylian Mbappe as he netted a brace, which therefore helps PSG seal a place in the Champions League quarterfinal for the first time in over 2 years. You understand? Remember, on the past two editions, PSG were knocked out in the last 16 by Real Madrid as well as Bayern Munich, respectively. So basically, for the first time in 2 seasons, they do progress to the next round. You understand? Of the UEFA Champions League. What went down in this clash at the Real Arena in San Sebastian? Kylian Mbappe now is set aside uncertainty surrounding his future with the double as Paris Saint-Germain, crashed into the UEFA Champions League quarterfinal with a comprehensive 2-1 victory at Real Sociedad. The 25-year-old, who looks bound for Real Madrid, in the summer, scored once in each half at the Real Arena in San Sebastian, as Luis Enrique's side won by 4-1 on aggregate to actually make it to the last 8 with Mikel Merino, the former Borussia Dortmund and Newcastle midfielder, scored a late consolation. But it was just nothing but a consolation for Real Sociedad, who are now basically out of contention of claiming any silverware this season. Remember, they've been knocked out in the semi-finals by Mallorca in the Copa del Rey. They are far off the pace in terms of challenging for La Liga, as well as now they are out of the UEFA Champions League. Kylian Mbappe once again demonstrated, his penchant, for the big stage as his deadly brace helped PSG, into the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals thanks to a 2-1 victory at Real Sociedad. And the French forward was the difference maker once again, in the first leg at the Parc des Princes, and his superb double, quashed any hope of La Real comeback as the Ligue 1 champions claimed a 4-1 success on aggregate. What I can actually say is that Mbappe was basically lively from the kickoff, showing explosive pace, to actually tee up an early chance for Bradley Barcola before silencing the Real Arena crowd, in San Sebastian with a significant solo effort on 15 minutes, just proving to us his quality, right? The 25-year-old hitman, basically he now looks poised to actually join Real Madrid in the summer. Added a second on 56 minutes when he raced free down the left, before beating Alex Ramiro with a smart near post finish. La Real showed belittled spirit, with the dead and pulled one back through Mikel Merino, but PSG managed to stay firm as part of an excellent round-up performance to actually cruise into the last 8 for the first time since 2021. And Mbappe. Remember, in recent times, Luis Enrique has created a great debate, in recent weeks, as he has actually made it clear that PSG need to learn to play without Kylian Mbappe following his decision to actually leave the club in the summer. So the Spanish coach, has substituted the forward early in, 2 League 1 matches, since the news was actually made public. But it was perhaps not surprising that the 25-year-old, played the entire game in the second leg of the competition. And Mbappe is clearly vital, to Paris Saint-Germain in terms of their hopes of, going deep into the UEFA Champions League. And actually record on this stage is befitting a player regarded by many as the best on the planet currently, alongside Erling Haaland as well as Lautaro Martinez. And there's no actually escaping the fact that Mbappe was a major force, in ensuring the current clubs, put aside, their last 16 travails of previous years, while most teams won't fear drawing PSG next. So the X factor that Mbappe brings makes, them a threat. You simply can't afford to actually underestimate, and perhaps, prioritizing his minutes in Europe, may yet actually prove, to be a bit of a genius from Enrique. But I guess, time will tell in the next round or so. And we'll actually see how far PSG can actually go in the tournament, because not many of us, are actually giving them a chance to actually go far in this year's tournament, but time will actually tell. And what I can actually say is that, PSG they've struggled over the years, you know. But remember last season they were playing against a star-studded Bayern Munich side, and the previous year they were playing against Real Madrid. So remember, Real Sociedad are not really a team that you would fancy, you know, to actually win the Champions League. They are not yet a team that is strong to compete in Europe as yet. You know, irrespective of the fact that they had an impressive group stage run, you know, knockout stages are way different. You know, because now you're going to be meeting your match. You'll be meeting teams that have been competing at this stage of the competition for many years prior. Remember, Real Sociedad haven't been in the Champions League for like almost over 2 decades. So I think that was a telling factor and the reason why they were unable to actually secure a result against Paris Saint-Germain in the last 16. So the other conclusion of the other first leg in Germany in Munich, right? Second leg, round of 16 encounter between Bayern Munich and Lazio. We all knew this was going to come, right? We knew that Bayern Munich were going to turn the deficit, that first leg deficit from Italy, and actually overturn it. You know, give credit once again, also Harry Kane, scoring a double as Bayern Munich were able to actually bounce back against Lazio to actually reach the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League. It was basically a fine brace from the England captain, you know, who actually helped Bayern Munich overturn a 1-0 deficit in their Champions League knockout, you know, clash against Lazio, which gives them progress, you know, to the quarterfinals of this year's UEFA Champions League by 3-1, you know, on aggregate, basically winning 3-0 on the night. And what can I say? The Italians, Lazio, they basically had chances to actually take the lead, most notably being spurned by their talisman Ciro Immobile. But Kane and Bayern Munich made the Italians pay. And basically it just goes back to what we say, the rule in football: you don't take your chances, you will be punished. And Lazio were punished, and it is Bayern Munich who actually moved through to the quarterfinals as expected. So, you know, it was actually instinctive goals from Harry Kane and Thomas Müller that actually saw Bayern Munich, you know, overcome a first leg deficit and actually beat Lazio 3-1 on aggregate to actually advance to the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals. Lazio actually started the game better, you know, in a short fashion, and, you know, they were frustrating their opponents, you know, at the Allianz Arena. But Ciro Immobile headed a difficult, you know, but close range chance wide. You know, it was actually not hard to think that, you know, any moment that missed opportunity by Ciro Immobile would come back to haunt the visitors, because just 2 minutes later it did, as Kane opportunistically headed in, you know, to actually level the tie, and Bayern Munich had an outright lead before the break as Müller diverted Matthias de Ligt's thunderous, you know, volley into the goal. And from that particular moment in time, we just knew that, you know, it was all going to be Bayern Munich, you know. But the Bavarians now again progress to the next round, last 8, you know, just breaking those records, and they just keep on breaking those records. And, you know, Kane now, he scored his second in the second half, tapping in a rebound to actually allow, you know, some breathing space for Bayern Munich. And, you know, Lazio were never really, you know, looking like a team that was actually going to get back into the game, you know, once they were behind on aggregate. So victory for Bayern Munich now means that they have reached the Champions League quarterfinals, you know, in 12 of their last 13 seasons, and eases the pressure on their manager Thomas Tuchel, who is leaving in the summer, but, you know, had been rumored to actually face an immediate firing should the German Giants have failed to advance. And Lazio have still never won a knockout tie in the UEFA Champions League and exited rather meekly without even having a single shot on target at the Allianz Arena. And with that being said, you know, Bayern Munich, you know, they still demonstrate the fact that they are still a force to be reckoned with, you know. Give credit to the fact that Bayern Munich, you know, entered this game, you know, as a team in a crisis, with the crisis of a danger spiraling with an early Champions League exit. So they now leave the Champions League, they now leave as Champions League quarterfinalists once again, you know, having served a reminder of the quality that they still possess. Remember, they were without Upamecano, the French defender, who was actually sent off in the first leg. And there's so much individual quality, you know, more than a collective. The goals were more about Kane and Müller's predatory, you know, instincts than any team moves. But it is nonetheless, you know, the quality which can hurt sides, just as it did, you know, in terms of it hurting the Italians, Lazio. You know, so the Italian side have never won a knockout tie in the Champions League. So, you know, it's important not to get carried away about Bayern being, you know, all the way back. You know, yet I can just say that, you know, their demise has just been too exaggerated. Of course, you can't always dominate in football, but look, Bayern Munich still have the quality. They can still compete at the highest level, and they've shown it, in yesterday's game against Lazio. And with that actually being said, is that Harry Kane now has scored 27 UEFA Champions League goals, with Wayne Rooney being the only Englishman with more goals in the competition with 30, right? So records keep on getting broken. And I can tell you, Harry Kane, he will break more records. He's just short with 4 goals just to actually be the all-time leading Englishman, in the UEFA Champions League. And Harry Kane's hopes of silverware this season are still alive, basically. After, he scored twice in a comprehensive victory for Bayern Munich, and now Lazio crash out with a whimper. Okay, UEFA Champions League. We're back there. So we're concluding the first round of fixtures from the round of 16 second leg, right? Encounters. Remember, we still have another 4 games to go, to conclude the round of 16. So these were the first of the final 8 games. The first 4 games of the final 8 games of the round of 16 second leg UEFA Champions League, knockout stages, right? So, yeah, we saw at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid, yes, they did progress thanks to an aggregate victory 2-1, them winning by 2-1 on aggregate. Although the score on the night was actually 1-1 at the Bernabeu. And fortunately, the hosts were able to edge out Leipzig, after a nervy UEFA Champions League draw at the Santiago Bernabeu. And what I can just say is that it was far from a convincing display from Carlo Ancelotti's Real Madrid side. In the UEFA Champions League last 16 second leg clash at the Santiago Bernabeu on Wednesday evening. And we saw the hosts, they were incredibly nervous as they just clung on to a 1-1 draw under some serious pressure from their fearless visitors. And in the end, Vinicius Jr.'s goal, proved to be very decisive as Los Blancos, sealed their progression to the quarterfinals once again. And, what we could actually say is that, yes, Vinicius Jr. was on target once again as Real Madrid edged into the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals following that 1-1 draw over RB Leipzig, Red Bull Leipzig, in a hard-fought last 16 second leg encounter at the Santiago Bernabeu. And it must be noted, it's always worth noting that, Carlo Ancelotti's side, the La Liga league leaders, they lack that cutting edge in attack for long spells of the game. And they actually survived. They were so fortunate to actually survive, 1 or 2 nervy moments before coming through with a tricky tie, courtesy of a 2-1 success on aggregate. And indeed, it was such a lackluster Real Madrid, which failed to register a shot on target until the past hour, when Vinicius Jr. was able to break the deadlock, when he riffled home an effort following a brilliant run and pass from Jude Bellingham. So it was a great combination between the Englishman as well as the Brazilian. Remember, the England and Brazil do face each other at Wembley Stadium in a friendly in this coming month. So we're actually looking forward to that clash, you understand? And you saw Rotten Bullen, had topped up their hopes of causing an upset ahead of the match, and Lois Openda, the brilliant Belgium, blew a trio of excellent first half openings. However, Marco Ross, side continued to actually show some belief. They had so much swagger, they had so much dagger, and they actually pulled level on the night. When Willy Orban headed in 3 minutes after Real Madrid scored the opener. And the Germans were able to push so hard. They pushed so hard, and they were just unable to find, that goal to actually force extra time. As Real Madrid were very fortunate to actually book their spot in their 20th UEFA Champions League quarterfinal and the last 8 of the European Cup, for a record extending 39th time. What is actually worth noting once again is the fact that, Real Madrid, will actually really need to improve more if they are to land a 15th UCL title. Because, there's been plenty of talk about Real Madrid needing a world-class striker, and much of this provided a microcosm, of why that's the case. Because Jude Bellingham, kind of frustrated, isolated figure at times as the whole struggled to make much of an impact in the final third until his moment of inspiration, which was able to set up, Vinicius Jr. for the goal that ultimately got Los Blancos over the line. You could actually forgive the Bernabeu faithful for dreaming of Kylian Mbappe, after his 2-goal blast for PSG on Tuesday night at, San Sebastian against Real Sociedad, but the striker's much anticipated move won't happen until the summer. So Real Madrid will actually have to find a way to make more of a focal point in attack if they are to be serious contenders for another Champions League, crown. And give credit to Antonio Rudiger. For me, he's my man of the match, because it wasn't a match where Real Madrid's creative stars shone, and Red Bull Leipzig, really should have forced extra time. But part of the reason why they didn't was Rudiger's imperious display at the back. The German produced a series of wonderful blocks and tackles as La Liga giants, were able just to squeeze into the last 8. And let's just say it for what it is. Antonio Rudiger is not a striker. He's not a striker. He's not a playmaker. He doesn't often get goals. He's not a goal scorer. But you must just give him credit for the fact that he is a match winner. Because those tackles that he made, those decisive blocks that he made, were the ones that actually ensured that Real Madrid do secure progression into the quarterfinals once again, and therefore people must just give him some credit where it's due. But we're crossing straight to the Etihad, seeing where the defending champions Manchester City, as expected, they went into this particular second leg encounter, with the healthy 2-0 lead, that they took away from Denmark over Copenhagen. And again, it was Erling Haaland who was on target as he hit his 41st UEFA Champions League goal, which was just well enough to actually see the citizens ease through into the quarterfinals once again. So Manchester City sealed their place in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League with the 3-1 home victory over Copenhagen. It was Manuel Akanji who added to Manchester City's 3-1 aggregate lead with an early opener. It was actually a mistake by their goalkeeper of Copenhagen, Kamil Krabara, who allowed Julian Alvarez to make it, 2 before Mohamed El Nyoussi, grabbed the consolation. And then Erling Haaland, the Norwegian, popped up with his 41st UEFA Champions League goal to actually seal the victory for the, the Sky Blues. What can I just say about this game? Because it was pretty obvious. We knew that Man City were just going to dominate and run rampant in this particular game. And that's exactly what they did. Because now, Manchester City now remain on course for a double treble after cruising into the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals. Just courtesy of a 3-1 victory over Copenhagen. And with their healthy advantage from the first leg, it took Pep Guardiola's side just, 5 minutes to open the scoring as Manuel Akanji made it 1-0 with a delicious volley before Julian Alvarez doubled the lead shortly afterwards. And we saw the former Southampton man, who's now on the books of Copenhagen, Mohamed El Nyoussi, pulled one back for the Danes with a delightful finish. And that led to a spirited period for the visitors until Erling Haaland was able to put the tie, to bed before the conclusion of the first 45 minutes. And it was actually plain sailing for Manchester City from that particular moment in time. Although Ederson made 1 or 2 saves from Magnus Madsen, they were just largely untroubled in a quiet second half. And at the other end, the hosts created very little against a compact defense, failing to even register a shot on target in the second half. However, we can just say that the job was already done irrespective of that, because, it was their 7th successive Champions League quarterfinal, that Manchester City will be partaking in. And let's just say it, the talking point from this particular game is that Manchester City, this was just a perfect preparation for them in that much anticipated clash against Liverpool. It is basically a title decider because Manchester City have arguably, their biggest game of the season so far is when they face Liverpool at Anfield. and it is a top of the Premier League clash on Sunday. And with that in mind, they just wanted to get through this match, unscathed, and by exerting as little energy as possible. And things therefore could not have gone better for Pep Guardiola's side, who had a 4-goal, aggregate lead by the break, meaning they could afford to take off Rodri at halftime while also allowing some rest for Ruben Diaz as well as Haaland, who was substituted later on. So, basically, congratulations once again to Julian Alvarez for that man of the match performance that he displayed, because the Argentine's goal was more than fortuitous, as he profited from a goalkeeping, clanger. But his performance on the night was much more than that. He barely put a foot wrong, in the center of the park, driving his, forward and really giving the ball away, as City largely controlled the tempo of the game, as expected. As we know, that's what the citizens do best. And it was actually a performance that certainly gives Manchester City and Pep Guardiola's side something to think about, as they head to Anfield over the weekend, pondering whether or not to actually play a second striker, in Julian Alvarez in support of Erling Haaland. So we wait to see how that will actually be, because it's going to be a very, emphatic encounter. I'm looking forward to that encounter between Manchester City and Liverpool at Anfield. Wow.